Welcome again. In this class we will talk about the concept of membrane potential. We have discussed the concept of neurons and nervous system. Now how impulse is transmitted from say brain to a hand that has been pricked by a needle. You need to understand the behavior of impulse and the travelling of impulse, and that impulse we understand under the concept of membrane potential. So when neurons are electrically charged, we call that membrane potential develops. Now when a membrane potential develops, we can understand that in three basic forms. One is resting potential, another is postsynaptic, and the next is action potential. Now before we move forward onto the details of the various kinds of potentials that we would be talking about, let's first understand the cell structure. Now as we talked about the neuron structure, you have the cell. The outermost layer of the axon is covered by a fatty layer which is known as the myelin sheath, and this myelin sheath is kind of impermeable to movement of substances or ion movement, I could say. So it prevents things from moving outside or entering into the cell. Between the myelin sheath you have nodes of Ranvier that are found, and through these nodes of Ranvier, which are unmyelinated or do not have a fatty layer, there is transfer of ions that takes place. Now what basically happens is, you have the protein that sticks to the cell and it forms the ion channels, and through that ion channels you have movement of sodium, potassium and chloride. So this is a structure where you have a kind of closed gate that could be seen, and here is a kind of open channel where you have movement of ions through the channel that takes place. Now when I try to explain ions, I can say they are charged particles. So let's talk about sodium. Sodium has a Na plus, that is it is a cation, and it has a kind of missing electron. However, on the other hand, you have chloride, that Cl minus, and this minus indicates that it is an anion and it has a kind of extra electron. So you have both the positive ions and the negative ions, and the balance between the positive and the negative ions within the nerve is important, and that balance maintains the kind of impulse that travels through the nervous system. Now these are kind of specialized cells, specialized transport mechanism that exist. Now when we talk about this mechanism in detail, we need to understand that you have the sodium and potassium that play a major role. However, there is an important question that lies, both of these have a kind of positive valency. To maintain a kind of balance of the cell, you need to have positive as well as negative valencies. So what is the negative that compensates this positive? So the negative would be the chlorine as well as the protein. Now chlorine would move through its channels, potassium would move through its channels, but protein particles being bigger in size are not easily moved through the ion channels, and they remain within the nerve impulse or within the cell of the neuron. So this is how we understand the positive and the negative elements that exist within the cell system. Now what basically happens is, in the nervous system or in the neuron, it's sodium that is pushed out and potassium that is pushed in. Now there are various stages under which you have the positive and the negative valencies that change, and we'll look as to how it goes. Now as we said, membrane potential will be understanding under resting potential, postsynaptic potential and action potential. Let's first start with resting potential. Now what happens to a neuron? A neuron has a strong negative charge by means of chlorine and protein that exists within the neuron, and the change occurs due to the anions that exist. Now this is a structure of inside the cell and outside the cell. As you can see, you have predominant potassium that exists inside the cell, and there is transfer of potassium that takes place. Now potassium can easily cross, as it's seen by the straight line. However, chloride and sodium are denoted by dotted lines. That means it makes it difficult for chloride and sodium to cross the nerve cells during the resting phase. Now first of all, the resting phase implies a kind of minus 70 millivolts. That means inside of the neuron is 70 milliwatts less than the outside. So you have the neuron that exists here, and inside of the neuron you have a charge of 70 millivolts, which is less than outside. That's the first thing you need to understand. Now the second thing is, similar to a battery which is fully charged acts the resting phase of a neuron. That means inside the neuron you will have the negative charge, and outside the neuron you would have the positive charge. Similar to the battery, as you can see, you have inside with negative charges and outside with positive charges. Similar is the resting phase of a neuron, where you have inside with negative charge and outside with positive charge first of all. Now at rest, what happens is more sodium moves outside and more potassium moves inside. So you have a kind of exchange of sodium and potassium that takes place, but however more sodium is moving out and more potassium is moving in. That is what happens during the resting phase. And now the important thing is, this sodium moves through the potassium channel itself. So the movement of sodium occurs through the potassium channel, and that occurs by two means. First is the electrostatic diffusion, the electrostatic movement, and the diffusion forces. So there are two forces that govern the movement of sodium through the potassium channels, and for every three sodium you have 2 potassium that is exchanged. So for every 3 sodium there would be exchange of 2 potassium that would occur. Now this is the resting stage, or a kind of, I could say, a stable state for the neuron to exist, and that is minus inside and positive outside. Now before we go into the details of action potential, let's understand how that works. Now the process of action potential is similar to firing of a gun. That means if I have a gun in hand and I have the knob that I have to press, if I press this knob to a point that the threshold or the minimum alert point is not reached, the gun would not fire. As soon as I would press it to a level that the threshold is reached, the gun would fire. So that's one thing that we need to understand. Now, as soon as the gun has fired, if I press it again, there would be no firing. When I say I press it again, I am talking about a gap of milliseconds. So I have just pressed it and you have fired the bullets, and I am again pressing it instantaneously, then there would be no firing that would occur, and that is what is known as the absolute refractory period. However, if I wait for say few seconds and try to fire it again, I will be able to fire it, but I would have to press the knob very hard. That means there would be a stimulus that is required, and that stimulus should be very, very high, and only then the gun would be able to fire, and that is what is known as the relative refractory period. We'll see again how it works in the later section. Now moving back to the action potential, coming back onto the main topic, we will try to understand how the concept of action potential works. So this is the signal that is moving on into a neuron, Now when I say it's a moving on signal, so let's say it's all happening in fraction of seconds, but this is how impulse travels, giving us a signal from brain to hand to remove the hand when you are being pricked by a needle. Now what is seen in red is the sodium that is going in, and what is seen in orange is the potassium that is going out. So now this sodium going in and potassium going out works like a speedy train, and that goes on throughout your nerve impulse from one neuron to the next neuron and to the next neuron. However, when we try to understand, we believe that this is how things work, or this is how signal is transmitted. But when we talked about the structure of neuron, we clearly mentioned that the axon has a layer which is known as myelin sheath, and this myelin sheath is a fatty layer. Since it's a fatty layer, it would prevent any kind of conduction to occur. As a result, what really happens is a somersaulting behavior. That means rather than moving through the each line that is seen here, it moves in spurts or it jumps. And that jumping is similar to a movement of hydra, which is a kind of somersault movement. So if you have a kind of hydra with tentacles here, the next stage you would show this, and in the next stage it would be kind of bent with the stage this. So that's a kind of leaping movement or jumping movement, I could say, that occurs, and similar movement it's seen in the neurons. So you have the signal that is passed through the nodes of Ranvier and it jumps. And this jumping movement is known as saltatory conduction. So it's not a kind of conduction that goes on through the neuron. It's a kind of leaping movement that occurs, and those leaps and bounds are known as saltatory conduction, and this occurs through the neuronal structure from one neuron to the other. Now once we are clear with how the nerve impulse passes, so let's say I have the structure of neuron that's here, and you have the next neuron with its dendrites here. So the axon of one neuron would merge with the dendrites of another neuron, and between that you would have a gap which is known as synaptic cleft. We'll see how that works when we talk about the postsynaptic cleft. Now moving on to the action potential, the major concept that we need to understand today. Now as I said, under the resting stage, what happens? You have inside which is negatively charged and outside which is positively charged. This is what is the resting potential. Till the point you reach the threshold potential, where you have the sodium that moves in and reaches a certain level, is known as the threshold level. After that threshold level, what would happen is a lot of sodium particles would try to gush in, and when there would be lot of sodium particles that would try to move in, the potential would change and you would have positive inside and negative outside, and this phase would be known as what is we call as depolarization stage. So what would happen is lot of sodium particle would move inside. So you would have numerous sodium that would move inside. As a result, inside would have a positive balance, positive potential as compared to outside, and this would be the stage what we call as depolarization under action potential. We are still on action potential itself. Excuse me. Now what would happen after depolarization? Since there is numerous sodium that is moving into the neuron through the channels, through the ion channels, what would happen? Potassium would have to move out. So you would have potassium that would move out. As a result, you would have again a negative inside and a positive and outside. However, and this would be known as the stage of repolarization. However, this is not what is meant to be achieved, because the stable state says you have Na outside and K inside, that is sodium inside, potassium inside and sodium outside. So what is achieved here is a kind of imbalance. It is, when we talk in terms of positive and negative charges, it looks to be perfect because the resting stage or the resting potential has the same charges, but when it comes to the ions that are present within the ions, it is imbalanced because you have potassium outside and sodium inside. As a result, it would try to again balance its structure, and again finally you would have sodium outside and potassium inside. So it would kind of try to revert back to its original position. So this phase of polarization and depolarization and repolarization is what is known as action potential. Then you would have a refractory period where you would have hyperpolarization that would occur. Now when we talk about the structure of neurons, you have the absolute refractory period and the relative refractory period. This absolute refractory period is what is the action potential, and that is what we talked about when we gave the example of firing of a gun. That means when you have fired a gun and you instantaneously fire it within milliseconds or microseconds gap, the gun won't be able to fire, and that is what is the absolute refractory period. However, beyond that period, if given a very high stimulus, the gun would be able to fire, and that is where we understand the relative refractory period. As you can see, the curve for the sodium permeability and the potassium permeability, the curve for the potassium permeability is much steeper in case of relative refractory period. So basically when we try to explain, if I move back to the previous diagram, and if we try to explain this diagram with help of the sodium and the potassium channels that open, I can say towards the initial stages you would have sodium channels that would open and close, and towards the later stages you would have potassium channel that would open and close. So I would say there is opening and closing of sodium here, and then during the refractory period you would have opening and closing of the potassium channels that would take place. Now moving back to the important concept of all or none law, or we also call it all or nothing law. That means axon either produces an action potential or it does not. There is no middle path that could be seen here. So either there would be a jerk that would be produced, or there would be no jerk that would be produced, for example. So for action potential to happen, what is the primary requirement is reaching the threshold level or the minimum level to excite the sodium ions to move in, and that is what is known as the threshold level. If it does not reach, the neuron will not fire. If it reaches, the neuron will fire. So there is no middle path that could exist. Either it will happen or it will not happen. The only thing that we need to note here is in the relative refractive period, as we said, the neuron would fire only if the stimulus is too strong to happen. Now if we move on to the understanding the postsynaptic potential, which is very important, let's talk about the same diagram that we have talked about in the class on neurons and nervous impulse. Now when we talk about the nervous impulse here, you have the presynaptic cell and the postsynaptic cell. You have the axon of one and the dendrite of the next. So you have the axon of one and the dendrite of the next, that is here. The point where they meet is the synapse, and the cavity here would be known as the synaptic cleft. Now what would happen at the end of the axon? You would have calcium channels that would open up. Now till now what we were talking was about the sodium potassium pump, but an important concept in nervous impulse is also about the calcium channels, and these calcium channels are important to understand under the postsynaptic potential. So what would happen here is the calcium channels would open. As soon as the calcium channels open, they would rush into the next cell, and when they would be rushing into a next cell, there would be diffusion force that would be predominantly active here, and it would excite the neurotransmitters towards which are present towards the terminal bulbs, and it would lead to release of neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters would be released. Now again, this release of neurotransmitters by the calcium channel opening would govern two phenomena. It could be excitatory in nature or it could be inhibitory in nature. As we have talked about in the previous class, we have gone through the various types of neurotransmitters which are excitatory and inhibitory. Now let's see how they function. We have discussed the lock and key mechanism. So you have a key that opens the lock, and you have neurotransmitters which are either excitatory or inhibitory. Now what would happen if the neurotransmitters are depolarized? You would have excitatory phase that would happen. That means the lock would open up. So you would have opening of lock during the process of depolarization. So in that curve, if we talk about the process of depolarization, you would have opening of the lock, and that would lead to the excitation of the neuron, and the threshold would be reached and the signal would be passed to the next neuron. However, during the phase of hyperpolarization, you would have inhibitory action that would be seen. That means there would be closing of the lock that would be seen, and during this hyperpolarization state, what would happen is there would be opening of the chloride and the potassium channels, but sodium channels will not open. So as we saw, let's move on to the graph below. As we saw in the previous graph here, so you would have sodium channels would be active till the phase of depolarization, and beyond that you would have potassium channels that would be active. So when we talk about neurotransmitters which are inhibitory during the phase of hyperpolarization that occurs here, you would have sodium channels that would be closed, but it would be open to the chloride and the potassium channels. Now again, till now many theories believe that one neuron could lead to one neurotransmitter at a time. However, in the recent studies, it has been found that one neuron can lead to more than one neurotransmitters, and that process is what is known as co-transmission or co-transmitters, where you have more than one neurotransmitter that is released by one neuron. So with this we cover the concept of nervous impulse and the membrane potential. We'll be covering more topics which are important for psychology for the upcoming examinations. You can subscribe to our channel for more details, and if you have any doubts relating to the action potential and the resting potential, you can leave those as comment below the video. We'll be more than happy to resolve those. Have a good day ahead.